Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and our quest for a low-cost gaming PC continues, and today we're looking at one I just bought on Amazon for $799. This is the Dell Inspiron 7000 series. I've got the exact part number that we're talking about here in the video title if you want to make sure you get a real apples-to-apples comparison. This is a 15.6-inch IPS display. I'll boot it up in a second so you can see the viewing angles on it. 2.3 gigahertz i5 Skylake processor, a 6300HQ. That is a quad-core processor, i5. And this is actually going to be very similar in its specifications to the Lenovo gaming PC we saw about a week ago, and I've got that video linked above. But note the processor, because that's going to be something interesting later on in the video. 8 gigabytes of RAM, 256 gigabyte SanDisk SSD, a GTX 960M NVIDIA graphics processor with 4 gigabytes of onboard video memory too. So really nice GPU on here, again for under 800 bucks. 802.11ac, 2x2, Bluetooth, 5.6 pounds overall, so not too heavy for a gaming PC. And I'm finding the battery life on it is actually pretty good. I'm getting about 5 or 6 hours of just general computing with it. Once you start playing games and hitting that GPU pretty hard, maybe an hour or two. You're not going to get a lot of battery life when you're heavily gaming. Games are not geared for power saving, but you can do a little bit before the battery goes out on you. Now, this is a no-frills gaming laptop, so you're not going to get a fancy case or anything like that. It's all plastic, although they did add some rubberized coating to this top of the screen here, so it does have a nice feel to it. It doesn't feel cheap. I do like the keyboard quite a bit. In fact, it reminds me of the keyboard that they put on the XPS 13 last year that I was very fond of. The keys feel very similar to that one. So they are a little bit smaller than most laptop keys, but they're well spaced and the travel time is really good on it. So really nice typing surface, and they have enough room here to stick in the number pad too. So if you're number crunching, in addition to gaming, you'll be quite happy with this one. The trackpad is getting a lot of abuse on Amazon. I actually like it. I don't think it's that bad for a Windows trackpad. I've never been all that crazy about Windows trackpads with the exception of the Surface Book back there. But this one actually isn't as bad as the Lenovo one I just looked at. So it's not, it doesn't require you to push down as far on it. It can be a little bit sensitive, so I turned off the tap to click, which I usually do anyhow, so it's not too bad there. Has stereo speakers up here, and it also has a subwoofer underneath it. The sound quality isn't spectacular on it. It is a little bit tinny, and you're not really going to hear any deep bass booms out of it, but it can be loud, which I guess is good. But I think if you want good sound, get yourself one of those gaming headsets with its own little soundboard, and I think you'll be much happier with the sound quality there. As for ports, you got a couple of them on here. We've got 2 USB 3.0 ports here, an analog headset adapter over here, so you can plug in your analog headset, or of course use a USB one or a Bluetooth one for that matter if you want to do that. Your power brick goes in over there. You've got some ventilation here for all the chips inside of the computer. You have a SD card slot here, another USB 3.0 slot, HDMI out for plugging in an external monitor, and gigabit Ethernet, and of course a Kensington lock. Now what's interesting is when we flip it around here, you'll notice there is a panel on the bottom here that it looks like it's very easy to remove, and in fact it is. So I'm going to get out my screwdriver here, and we're going to take that screw out and see what this looks like inside. And as you can see, my force skills have been improving. So this is what you got inside. What's nice is that it's very easy to get into the laptop to add stuff or take stuff out. So you'll notice here we have an extra slot of RAM available, so we could probably get this easily up to 16 gigabytes of RAM if we wish to do that. It's DDR3 RAM. We also have the SanDisk SSD here. This is an M2 SSD. You can easily just pop that out if you wanted to upgrade it. And you'll also notice that the hard drive slot here is empty, so you can get a mobile hard drive, an SSD or something, pop it in there, and you can get another hard drive installed on here without a lot of effort. In fact, they already leave you with a SATA connector already taped down for your use. Now, you can't upgrade the processor or GPU, but there is a lot of upgradeability in here, and I do like how easy it is to remove that panel. Most likely, you cannot snap your fingers to do it, but it just takes a single screw and you'll get that panel off. So I'm going to put this back together, boot it up, and we'll put it through some tests. All right, so let's boot it up here. We'll see how fast everything comes to life. You can see it does have a backlit keyboard, just white. You can't change the color, but it is backlit. and we'll see how fast everything pops open here. So you can see it really does boot up quite quickly to your Windows login screen, which is great. I'm just going to log in real quick and then show you a couple of things before we get into some gaming. One of the nice things about a gaming laptop is that it does things extremely fast in other computing areas. So web browsing and Photoshop and video editing, you will get performance out of this $800 computer that you will likely see out of $2,000 or $3,000 computers. This has a really recent i5 Skylake processor, a really good GPU. In many cases, some of these $2,000 or $3,000 computers don't even have a separate GPU. So this is a really good value for more than just gaming. This could be a very good video editing platform as well as a good photo editing platform. So if you have a need for that and don't need anything spectacular in the looks department, this actually is going to perform exceptionally well, even just for things like browsing the web and more advanced things like video editing and other things too. My only gripe on the display here is that it's not as bright as I would like it to be, although the viewing angles on it are very good. I just wish it was a little bit brighter, but it's not bad to look at, and it's a matte finish too, so you don't get all that reflectiveness going on. So we're going to start our game tests now. We're going to begin with Minecraft, and we'll end up on Grand Theft Auto and then run some benchmarks too. All right, so we are running Minecraft here, and normally when we're looking at a $200 PC, we get frame rates that, if we're lucky, get to about 30 frames per second. Here we're running over 250 to 300 frames per second, so we're doing really well here. I do have the Optifine plugin, it says it up here, which is a plugin that enhances the performance on lower-end PCs, and I always like to do like an apples to apple across the board. So we're running the same thing on this one, and it really does give us a tremendous performance boost. Now, if you saw my review of the Lenovo, what happened was I didn't realize that it was running off the Intel GPU instead of the NVIDIA GPU. So these machines both have the built-in Intel video as well as that external GPU, because it switches to the Intel one to save power. So you do need sometimes to go into your NVIDIA control panel and force the external GPU to turn itself on, at least with Minecraft. So there is a little bit of flakiness, switching back and forth between that Intel and that NVIDIA GPU. So that's one setting you might want to adjust. I'm going to be revisiting that on the Lenovo this weekend. So look for that video, and I'll show you the setting that I use to force that change also when I do that. But there you go. You can see how Minecraft works here. Minecraft is certainly no problem. It's going to run great. All right, I've got my game controller out, and Rocket League is loaded up on our Dell here. Let's take a look and see what kind of settings we're operating at. Pretty much cranked up everything, and we're at 1920 by 1080. I'll pop back into the game here. I am playing against some bots just to not upset those on the web playing Rocket League tonight. And as you can see, we're in the upper 60s here on frame rate, or at least on the mid 60s. It does dip down a little bit below, as you can see here, but this is really pretty much where I saw performance on this game with that Lenovo laptop we looked at last week, which had the i7 Skylake processor. This has the i5. Both have the same GPU, so I'm guessing, at least in this game, that this is a very GPU-dependent game as far as performance is concerned, and that's why we're seeing a very consistent frame rate between this one and the other one. But what isn't consistent is Grand Theft Auto 5 performance, and we're going to boot that up and see what's going on there. Now, before we get into the game, I do want to show you the settings that I have configured on here. What I decided to do was have this at the same exact settings as we saw on the Lenovo that we looked at last week, which had the same GPU but a faster i7 CPU. Both are Skylake CPUs, but this has the i5 and the Lenovo had the i7. So let me finish scrolling through this menu. You can pause if you want to look at something in more detail, and we'll back out to the game. Now, what was interesting is we had a steady and pretty consistent 60 frames per second frame rate on the Lenovo with that i7, and again, the same 960M GPU with the same amount of memory on board. And you can see the frame rate here is not as fast, and in fact, it's dipping below 40 at some points here. And I think there's two things going on. One is that maybe this is not cooling itself as efficiently as the Lenovo is, because as these graphics processors heat up, they actually slow down a little bit to prevent them from overheating. But the other thing I think is going on is that GTA 5 does hit the CPU a lot harder than many other games do. And I think the i5, it maybe just isn't able to keep up as well as the i7 processor can, because it's more than just megahertz. It's actually able to do more things at once, things that GTA 5 might require of it. And I'm going to link above, there's a little card that's going to appear right here from another YouTuber who did a really interesting head-to-head test of an i5 versus an i7 running with the very same GPU. And you can see that in that video when you link over to it, that the CPU is really pegged a lot on that i5 versus the i7, which runs much more efficiently in GTA 5. So we're certainly well above 30 frames per second. This game is very playable, but you'll have to turn the settings down a little bit more if you really want to hit a 60 frames per second frame rate on here in order to get the performance that you might want to see. And again, I think it's thermal, and I also think it has to do with the processor on here. So you might want to spring for an i7-based gaming laptop if you can afford it. All right, one last thing to look at, and those are some benchmarks, because it's often good to see how things perform on paper. And this is the 3D Mark Cloudgate Benchmark. This really pushes a lot of things in very strenuous ways. And on this test, we get a score of 12,398. And you'll note that's below the score we got on the Lenovo Y700 running with that i7 processor. But if you look at the graphics scores, they're almost identical. 138 on the first test for our Dell here, and 136 on the second one, pretty much exactly the same on that second graphics test. Those tests really work the GPU almost exclusively, and you can see because it has the same GPU, they perform about the same. But look at the CPU score. We get a 21 frames per second score on the Lenovo Y700 with the i7 processor, but 12.5 with the i5 chip that is on the Dell. And the reason is that this is a slower processor, and you can see really the difference there between what a mobile i7 can do and what a mobile i5 can do. So I think that's where our Grand Theft Auto 5 issue is. If this benchmark is any indication, it can definitely choke up the works a little bit. But what's interesting is that we are again on an $800 computer, and look at the score the Microsoft Surface Book got. My Surface Book right back there, which costs like $2,000 or $3,000 depending on how you configure it. That one scores significantly less. So if you're looking for something high powered and don't want something that necessarily, or need something that looks as nice as the Surface Book does, this is going to perform exceptionally well for things that you might need this kind of horsepower for. So that is the Dell Inspiron 7000 gaming machine, and I think this is a great value at $799. You really are getting a lot of computer here that in just about every measurement is faster than my Surface Book over there that I think I paid like $2,200 or $2,300 for. So you're getting a lot of power in here for very little money. Now, if you are a serious gamer and you want those 60 frames per second frame rates on GTA 5 and want your graphics settings cranked up, this is probably not the laptop for you, but you're gonna have to spend a lot more to get the one that's for you. So this is going to be adequate. It will run those games at a playable frame rate. You can certainly tweak everything and reduce settings further to get closer to 60 if that's where you want to go. I did see, again, better performance out of that i7 Lenovo that we looked at a week ago, but that also costs about $400 more as that one was configured versus this one. So, you know, every time you spend more money, you will get better performance. But if you're looking for something cheap and workable, this is definitely going to be it. And I think especially for video editors and photographers, this is a lot of power in this thing for very little money. It's not the most portable thing in the world. It certainly isn't all that pretty to look at, but it definitely will be a good utilitarian device that'll get the job done. And I am really actually quite impressed with what you can get here for $800. And I didn't realize we've gotten down to this point where this power is at a price well under $1,000. I'm going to keep looking, though. I'd love to get more suggestions from you, so keep sending them my way. I'd love to see more laptops with discrete GPUs that are in this price range or lower. So if we can get down to $600 next, let's see if we can find something. So leave me a comment below, and we'll keep the hunt on for a good, powerful gaming laptop. This is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching. This channel is brought to you by the generosity of my Patreon supporters. If you find the channel helpful, you too can contribute for as little as $1 a month. Visit Lon.TV/Patreon to learn more.